In 1834, deep in the Kentucky hills, a storm brought forth a pair of twins, so strange that priests recoiled, doctors fled, and neighbors whispered they weren't human at all. Their cries rose as one voice, and their fate became a mystery science still cannot explain. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story from our nations. Shadows, and tell me, do you believe some horrors defy all reason? Kentucky was a land of rolling hills, thick forests, and isolated farms, where neighbors were often miles apart, and nights stretched on in silence, broken only by the cries of wolves or the whistle of the wind. In towns, wooden churches stood at the center of life, while superstition clung tightly to every hearth and homestead. Medicine was primitive. Doctors carried leather satchels filled with leeches, opium, and crude surgical tools. Illnesses that today seem minor, like fever or infection, often meant death. And when science had no answers, people turned to faith or to fear. The 1830s were also a time of religious revival sweeping through Kentucky. Traveling preachers thundered about sin and salvation under makeshift tents. Anything that strayed from the ordinary was branded as divine punishment, or worse, witchcraft. It was a world where the mysterious and the macabre were not studied, but shunned. Families with children born different often hid them away. Communities whispered. And in those whispers, myths grew. So when word spread of twins whose very presence unsettled livestock, disrupted prayers, and seemed to bend the ordinary rules of nature, it was no surprise that the people of rural Kentucky did not see them as children. They saw them as a sign and omen. And in a time when science could explain so little, the unexplained was feared most of all. It was late summer of 1834. Thunder rolled across the Kentucky hills, shaking the wooden beams of a small farmhouse where a young mother, pale with exhaustion, cried out in pain. Inside, two midwives worked frantically by candlelight, sweat on their brows, their hands trembling, not only from the labor before them, but from the storm that rattled every window pane. At last, the first child emerged, a boy. He cried, but not like other babies. His cry was sharp, piercing, like a shriek that made the candles flicker. The midwives exchanged nervous glances. Before the mother could even hold him, another cry echoed from within her. Moments later, the second child arrived, his brother. And as the second twin let out his first cry, the first fell silent. Then, in perfect unison, both began wailing together, same pitch, same tone, as if one voice spoke through two mouths. The father, a poor farmer with dirt still under his nails, stumbled back against the wall, crossing himself again and again. "God help us," he whispered. The midwives, seasoned women who had delivered dozens of children, could not disguise their unease. One muttered that it was unnatural for two newborns to be so perfectly in sync. Another whispered an old superstition, that children born during a storm carried the storm inside them. By morning, the neighbors already knew. Word traveled quickly in rural Kentucky, and the story twisted with every telling. Some said the twins had been born with strange marks across their skin. Others claimed their eyes opened too soon, watching the room with a knowing stare no infant should possess. The truth was simple enough. Two fragile babies, born in a storm. But in 1834, truth mattered little. What mattered were the whispers that would haunt these twins from the very first breath they took. At first, the parents tried to believe the boys were ordinary. They gave them simple names, common names of the day, hoping that ordinary labels might ward off extraordinary fears. The mother sang lullabies at night, rocking them by the fire. The father, though wary, built small wooden cradles side by side. But soon, strange patterns began to emerge. When one twin stirred in his sleep, the other shifted at the exact same moment, as though tethered by an invisible string. When one cried out, The other wailed with the same rhythm, same pitch, same intensity, as if their lungs were controlled by the same unseen hand. Neighbors noticed. Women fetching water from the well whispered that the boys' shadows sometimes moved oddly against the wall, as though one caste belonged to both. Men swore the family's livestock refused to go near the twins' cradles, bleating nervously until they were led away. Then there were the fevers. On several occasions, one child would grow pale and weak, his skin clammy, and his breath shallow. Hours later, the second child, who had been perfectly healthy, would collapse with identical symptoms, though no infection could be found. And just as mysteriously as the fevers arrived, they vanished, leaving both boys as strong and restless as before. The mother's love began to tremble under the weight of fear. She clutched her sons tighter at night, whispering prayers under her breath. Yet she could not shake the feeling that they were watching her, not with the innocent gaze of babies, but with a deep, uncanny awareness that by the time the boys were old enough to crawl, the family had become the subject of hushed gossip in church pews and markets. Some said the twins were blessed with a gift. Others claimed they were cursed, a living omen of tragedy yet to come. And all the while, the parents lived in a kind of quiet dread caught between protecting their children and fearing them not. As the twins grew, so too did the questions and the fear. By the time they were toddlers, their eerie synchronicity was undeniable. They laughed at the same time, reached for objects in mirrored movements, and often spoke a strange babble in unison, as though carrying on a private language no one else could understand. The parents, desperate for answers, sought out the few doctors available in rural Kentucky. One physician, an older man with spectacles and trembling hands, examined the boys by lantern light. He pressed his stethoscope to their chests, tapped their knees, peered into their eyes. At last he pulled away with a pale expression. "These children," he muttered, "share something deeper than blood. I cannot explain it." He left the farmhouse quickly, refusing to return. Months later, a traveling physician from Lexington arrived, a man who prided himself on modern science. He measured the twins, sketched their likeness in his journal, and spent hours watching their mirrored movements. In the end, he declared them a phenomenon beyond reason. His notes would vanish into obscurity, never to be published. When science failed, the family turned to faith. The local pastor came, carrying a worn Bible. He prayed over the children, sprinkling holy water across their foreheads. At first, all seemed calm. Then the boys began to laugh both at once, the sound sharp and strange. The pastor recoiled, closing his Bible with a snap. "They are not mine to save," he said, and he, too, refused to return. Superstition filled the void. Neighbors offered crude remedies: a pouch of herbs tied to the cradles, a charm buried beneath the doorstep, iron nails hammered into the rafters to ward off spirits. One old woman suggested separating the boys, entirely sending one away to distant kin, lest their bond grow darker with age, but nothing worked. The twins remained inseparable, bound by a mystery no doctor, preacher, or neighbor could unravel. And with every failed attempt, the family sank deeper into isolation. By now, the whispers were louder than the prayers. Some believed the boys carried the devil's mark. Others claimed they were proof of God's wrath. And yet, the greatest fear was the one no one dared to say aloud, that the boys might not be human at all. By 1836, the twins were nearly 2 years old. Their strangeness had become the stuff of local legend, but nothing compared to what happened one autumn evening, a night that sealed their fate in Tician. Whispers for generations thought it began as an ordinary day. The father was mending a fence, the mother preparing supper, while the twins played on the floorboards near the fire. But then, without warning, one child collapsed, his small body convulsing, eyes rolling back in his head. The mother screamed, scooping him into her arms, before she could cry for help. The second boy, who had been laughing moments before, went rigid. His body arched unnaturally, every muscle locked. Both children lay in her lap, their faces pale as wax, their lips trembling. The father burst through the door, frantic, shouting for the neighbors. But as the cries echoed through the farmhouse, something impossible happened. Every candle in the room extinguished at once, plunging the family into darkness. The fire in the hearth sputtered out, leaving only the sound of the boys' ragged, synchronized gasps. Neighbors arrived minutes later, lanterns in hand. They found the mother on the floor, rocking both children in her arms, muttering prayers through her tears. The twins were alive, but their tiny chests rose and fell at the exact same rhythm, every inhale, every exhale locked together as though controlled by a single breath. And then came the fire. Later that night, as the family tried to rest, flames erupted suddenly in the barn. Hay and timber went up in seconds, the animals shrieking as smoke filled the air. The father and neighbors rushed to fight the blaze, but amidst the chaos, someone noticed something terrifying. The twins, wide awake at the window, were laughing. Not like children, high-pitched, shilling laughter that carried over the crackling fire. The barn burned to the ground. No one could explain how it started. But in the days that followed, the whispers grew into full-throated accusations. The boys brought it, one man declared. They cursed this land. Another spat. For the family, there was no peace after that night. The twins were no longer just an oddity. They were a threat of danger that the community could no longer ignore. After the fire, the family's life unraveled quickly. Neighbors no longer came to help with harvest. Invitations to church stopped. Mothers pulled their children away when the twins appeared in the doorway. What little community they had was gone. The parents tried to endure the isolation, but by winter, rumors had spread beyond the small farming valley. Some claimed officials had been notified. Others whispered the church had taken an interest. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Within a year, the family disappeared. No public records remain. No obituary. No land transfer. It is as though the house and the children simply vanished, but traces linger. In a small hillside cemetery outside the nearest town, there are 2 unmarked stones, weathered and broken, said to belong to the twins. No dates, no names. Just crude markers that locals avoid even now. For generations, the story passed from tongue to tongue. Farmers told their children never to wander too close to the woods near the old homestead. Travelers swore they heard laughter echoing across empty fields on stormy nights. Some even claimed to see 2 small figures darting among the trees, their faces pale, their movements perfectly mirrored as decades turned to centuries. The tale of the Kentucky twins became less of a memory and more of a warning and nice, enduring piece of folklore that resisted explanation. Even today, amateur historians and paranormal researchers search for evidence. A few scattered journals mention the children. A physician's sketch survives in a private collection. But nothing offers a rational explanation. And perhaps that is why the legend endures. Because the human mind can accept tragedy, and it can accept miracle, but it struggles to accept what cannot be explained. The Kentucky twins of 1834 live on, not in flesh, but in whispers, in shadows, in every unanswered question that still chills the air of those quiet hills. Nearly 2 centuries have passed since the birth of the Kentucky twins, yet their story refuses to die. Historians dig through faded archives. Doctors speculate about rare medical conditions, and skeptics dismiss the tale as exaggerated folklore. But even with modern science, no one has ever provided a clear, logical explanation. Were they victims of a misunderstood illness, something beyond the knowledge of 19th century medicine? Or were they something else entirely, an unexplainable phenomenon that slipped through the cracks of human understanding? The truth may never be known. What remains is a lingering unease, a reminder that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. For every question science has answered, there are others that resist, mocking our certainty, daring us to confront the unknown not. And so, in the quiet hills of Kentucky, the story of the twins lives on not in history books, but in warnings whispered around campfires, in the nervous glances of locals, and in the chill that creeps down your spine when thunder rolls across the night sky. Some secrets remain buried. Others, no matter how deep you try to hide them, never truly rest. Before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who dares to peer into the forgotten corners of history. And tell me in the comments, do you believe the Kentucky twins were a medical mystery or a supernatural curse?